It is 4:30 on Monday, June 13th. I call this meeting of the Clear Creek Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been duly called and that its notice has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. And with that being said, we will move into closed session. It is roughly 4:33. The board will now move to closed session as authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Section 551.001 concerning purposes permitted by the act, including 551.071 consultation with attorney, 551.072 deliberation regarding real property, 551.074 deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignments, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public employee, or to hear a complaint or charge against an employee. And with that, we'll move in. back into open session at 4:47 p.m. And I don't think we have any community input, so we'll move immediately to item 5, action on closed session items. And I'll remind everybody that we will not be voting on item B yet. And do I have a motion for
Mr. President?
Mr. Larson?
Yes, I'd like to accept the superintendent's recommendation to select Angela Hinkleman for the position of Director of Professional Learning.
Thank you for that motion, Mr. Larson. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I'll ask if there's any comment. Seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And motion carries 6-0. And I'll move on to item C.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Bowen?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation of Jeff Kohlenberg for controller.
Thank you for that motion, Mr. Bowen. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Jessica, I saw you.
I'm good.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw you. Thank you for that second, Mr. Cottrell. Any comment? See no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. And Dr. Williams.
Yeah, we appreciate the board approving each of these recommendations. We're enthusiastic about each of them. First, Ms. Angela Hinkleman, serving as Director of Professional Learning. She has more than 20 years of experience in education, most recently serving as an assistant principal in CCISD, previously serving as an instructional coach in Katy, and as a professional learning coordinator in Louisville ISD. And we are also pleased about Jeff Kohlenberg returning to CCISD in the position of controller. As most everybody knows, he served with Clear Creek already for more than 20 years. He also has more than 5 years experience in auditing in the private sector, and also several years of experience in other ISDs, so we're excited that he's returning as well. On another note, you may have already mentioned it, Mr. Cunningham, and I may have missed it in terms of community input. There's no community input, that's correct? Right, yeah. And you may have already referenced that, and I missed it. Good. I just want to make sure we documented that.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I will say Alice looks like a kid at Christmas. So congratulations to the department overall. I think that's fantastic. And next we'll move on to item 6, approval of the human resource report. Do I have a motion?
You mind? No, let me.
Mr. President?
Mr. Bowen?
I move that we approve the human resources report.
Thank you for that motion, Mr. Bowen. Do I have a
second that.
All right. Jessica, I was waiting for you. Seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. And next, we'll move on to item 7, Professional Learning Communities Program Change by our very own Dr. Sheridan Henley.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the data that we've collected throughout this school year for professional learning communities. So this is our Professional Learning Communities Program Gauge. So just a reminder, the purpose of program evaluations, gauges, or summaries in Clear Creek ISD results is multifaceted and results in findings, conclusions, or recommendations that align to our superintendent targets, to our strategic plan, or to our community-based accountability report. It also can assess the strengths and weaknesses of that program, can measure the success of the program in meeting its expressed goals, and result in improvement, revisions, or discontinuation of the program. For professional learning communities, we chose a program gauge, which is the periodic process of examining the fidelity and effectiveness of that program that's in a new state of implementation, undergoing a change, or we just don't have sufficient data to conduct a full program evaluation. This is very similar to what would be a formative assessment in the classroom. We're getting those small snippets of data, so we're going to collect all of it before we do a summative evaluation of it. We aligned this professional learning communities program gauge to the strategic plan under inspiring student agency and growth, which basically expands learning opportunities that foster that growth of students that focus on high levels of learning, as well as expanding the organization's capacity to provide professional learning resources for our teachers and a system of professional learning communities that develop that growth of the teachers in their professional development, which in turn then grows instructional learning for students. We did align this to the community-based accountability report under professional learning quality staff, as well as student learning and progress. And this is also aligned to superintendent targets for the 21-22 school year with a fidelity metric of highly functioning professional learning communities with effective metric of a program gauge that yields qualitative observations regarding the effectiveness of that PLC and how to make improvements toward that work. So some background information on professional learning communities. Just the definition is an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively to achieve better results for the students they serve. It is the fundamental idea that the key to improved learning for students is the continuous job embedded learning for our educators. Additional background information for a PLC you'll find on page 8 of your program gauge of the 3 big ideas. So we have the focus on a collaborative culture, which is really that collaborative and shared responsibility for all learning for all students, with a focus on learning, which is where they have the high levels of learning for every student in the classroom, as well as a results-oriented, which is a focus on evidence of student learning. And our program gauge presentation, as well as the guide that you have in front of you, really focuses areas on those 3 big ideas with information from campus leaders, information from instructional coaches, as well as information from teachers. Additional background information on a PLC. There are driving questions that PLC works through, which is what do we want our students to know and how will they be able to do it? How will we know if that student has learned it? How will they respond if they don't understand it? And how will we extend that learning for students that actually demonstrate proficiency? As they work through the elements of a PLC, there really are educators working collaboratively rather than in isolation. So we're going to bring that teamwork together, and that's usually done through the norms process, as well as collecting common goals for which all members are mutually accountable. We are going to look for those knowledge and skills that are evidence for the necessary learning for students, as well as common formative assessments where you can assess that data, and then you have evidence of that student learning that then informs the next piece of that instruction for that PLC. So it's again that cycle of continuous improvement and continuous learning for all. For this particular PLC program gauge for 21-22, for the effectiveness metrics, we really focus on key data points. The first was the 21-22 fall and spring performance survey data. We worked on PLC service survey data, for campus leaders from some guiding coalitions at each level, high school, intermediate, elementary, as well as instructional coaches across our district, and teacher focus groups at each level, high school, intermediate, and elementary. So you'll see the first section of data on page 9 in your guide. Up here we have the overall. This is from our fall and spring performance survey data. You'll see an indication of teachers and administration when they talk about, I regularly meet with teachers in a professional learning community. I'm sorry, this was just teachers. My apologies. You'll see that in the fall we had an 83.7% agree, strongly disagree, with an 86.4% in the spring agree, so a little bit of an increase, but we also doubled the participation rate from that fall survey to the spring survey data. When we look at, in the spring, we asked an additional question that we did not ask in the fall to break down really the STAR EOC subject areas because we were looking at those core content. And so we looked at teachers regularly meeting in that professional learning community, and then do they teach it? When you look at the breakdown, you'll see that 89% of the teachers agree, or strongly agree, that they do regularly meet in that professional learning community for that STAR EOC tested subject. So those are your core areas. You'll see a breakdown on page 10 in the guide where you'll see an elementary and a secondary breakout from that same question. As we continue forward with the PLC program gauge performance summary, performance survey data, we asked the question, the district has provided campus leaders and teachers with training or resources on PLCs and to plan for student engagement. You'll see in the fall, we had 77.5% agree or strongly disagree with a 77.9 in the spring. Again, you'll see a doubling of the participants from 664 in the fall to 1,323 in the spring survey. Remaining neutral, staying right at roughly that 14 and 13.8%. The next section of data that we really focused on when we asked was what was a guiding coalition within that PLC. And the definition of a guiding coalition is the alliance of key members equipped to help lead change. So these help build that culture of collective responsibility on that campus and help drive the PLC work. So it's a group of campus administrators, key teacher leaders that help inform the work of the PLC process on the campus. When we asked campus administrators on page 12, you'll see the breakdown of the Likert scale of how they would pre-assess and post-assess for guiding coalition work on their campus, where we have the beginnings of guiding coalition as they've identified those key staff members. It's the team and the administrator picking the learning topics all the way up to that Likert scale of 5, where it's really the guiding coalition members that are living out that collective responsibility for change on the campus, and that it's the guiding coalition team that actually works together to help those essential learning standards. You'll see that in the fall we had an average of 2.38, and in the spring an average of 3.84. In addition, you'll see the breakdown on page 12 of the percentage of each one of those indicators, where you'll see a shift of moving out of the level 2s, the 1s and 2s, into the levels 3s and 4s, and up there in the 5. So they are shifting to creating that guiding coalition to where the guiding coalition is doing the work that it's designed to do on the campus. When we asked instructional coaches really to define guiding coalitions for their campuses that they serve, they really gave us indication that they were various stages of implementation in the PLC guiding coalition process. Some were in the beginning and some had shifted quite significantly throughout the year. They did indicate in the data that there were shifts in mindset toward a more student-centered collaborative campus culture across. And through our coding process of the qualitative data, we really indicated that there was a focus on building that capacity within the guiding coalition that focused on that student-centered work and that collaborative culture, that the guiding coalition did help craft the school's mission. And then some coaches did indicate that they were still in that beginning stages, that they hadn't quite moved further into that guiding coalition work. When we asked teacher survey data about the coalition process, we had two big questions that we asked them. The first was, what's been the biggest impact of the PLC process and the guiding coalition on your campus? And there were 4 themes that really emerged in the coding process. That was teams, students, collaboration, and essential standards. And when we further looked for the evidence, there were comments such as staff was empowered to work together to talk about learning in a deeper way. There were indications that it pushed team administrators and instructional coaches to be on the same page, as well as improve that student learning. So it was working together to support student learning. One indication they did say about that was that they need more time to make that happen. When we asked other wins in that PLC process and on the guiding coalition, again, themes that emerged from that coding process were teams, collaboration, student learning, and intentionality. And so further comments that support that is teachers were shifting to become more positive about the PLC process, quoting that it's not one more thing we're doing, but rather the work that we are doing. They were talking about it was more of a collaboration of shared ideas and prioritizing the essential learning standards for the students that they instruct, as well as it helped that when they were working together in that collaborative process, they got to see different views and backgrounds that helped really prioritize the learning for the students. The next section of our presentation in the PLC really focuses on collaborative culture. And collaborative culture is really teachers having the shared responsibility for student learning. And then it's working interdependently to achieve common goals, which all members of the PLC are held mutually accountable. When we break down the campus administrator data for this particular collaborative culture, the Likert scale on page 15 starts off where the focus is on just covering the content. Teachers are working in isolation. They're working solely for the students just in their classroom, or individual teachers are determining the priority of the standards. To the shift up to 5, which is really focusing on teaching and learning and demonstration of proficiency, working in team collaboration for a shared ownership, collective responsibility, as well as the team establishing the priority of standards. So it's shifting from the sole teacher being responsible to the team of teachers being responsible. You'll notice that the average overall, when they did the pre-assessment, post-assessment from the administrators, was an average of 3.13 to a 3.64. So we had a little bit of growth in establishing that collaborative culture from the campus administrator point of view. When we further break down data, then we looked at the breakdown of each one of the indicators, and you'll see again a shift out of the 1 and 2s and 2s and 3s up into the 3s, 4s, and again into our 5s. So we're moving that collaborative culture from one of teacher independence to team collaboration. Instructional coach data, the feedback we heard from them from the data, the 2 pieces that emerged were norms and the importance of them, and then clarity of purpose. When teams create norms, it's really a commitment to act or behave in a certain way. And so coaches really focused on collecting those norms to create that collaborative culture within their PLC teams they support. Part of the idea of norms is they're an ongoing process. They're looked at periodically in the assessment. They should be evaluated for effectiveness. You want to focus on just a handful, a few that clarify, and really it's what guides the conversation and helps keep the team working on the work and focusing on instruction for the students. You'll see on page 16 of the guide that we asked the question, has each teacher team developed norms through a collaborative practice? 80% said yes overall, with a breakdown of 20% with no. Coding process data indicates that some of the coaches said they've worked through them. Did they do it correctly? No, but it's a process and we're working through that process. That each PLC is in a different place. These are the ones that they serve. Some have mastered the practice of norms, some have not. As well as they've developed norms, but some may not operate or use them as effectively as they should. In further exploration of the 20% to find out why, we got statements such as they were already created from previous teams, and so they brought them from the previous year on. They were created, or others wanted to just dive into the PLC work, and so they didn't focus on the norm process. They wanted to focus on the instructional piece of that and the essential standards. When we analyze the data for collaborative culture and clarity of purpose, and this is really when each time a PLC meets, it should be guided with specific objectives or desired outcomes. We asked the question from the instructional coaches on what percentage of core content teams, so this would be our core areas, math, science, English, social studies. We asked that's clarity of purpose with specific intentions for collaboration each time they meet. You will see that 30.8% said that 76 to 100% of the time they do have clarity of purpose. You will see that there were 15.4 that were over 50%. When we asked how many PLCs that each coach serves on a campus, it ranged from 0, we had 4.6%, you'll see that I believe on page 17, But 52% of our instructional coaches surveyed said they serve anywhere from 6 to 10 PLCs. And so I think that's important when you look at the data overall on that clarity of purpose and norm building. We asked teacher surveys specifically how is working with guiding coalitions implementing PLCs impacted the effectiveness of that collaborative teacher teams. Themes that emerged from the coding process and worked on teams, team building, working, collaboration, and the guiding coalition itself being important in that PLC collaborative culture process. Data from those, qualitative data from that teacher survey established that the teams have been working together and doing what's best for kids. It reaffirms that they are focused and motivated. Some of the statements said that it is impacting in our positive way. It's becoming more focused on those essential learning standards. However, it also, we need the time to have those conversations, and we have to be vulnerable whenever we build that collaborative culture and look at the data that results from the formative assessments. Just some other indications from our focus group data. These were intermediate, high school, and elementary teachers that agreed to meet with us and talk with us. We asked 3 specific questions. The first one was describe how working in a PLC has increased your own professional effectiveness. Some of the comments from that in the coding process said that we had common goals, purpose, and common planning when we met together, and it was that shared responsibility for the students they taught. This is on page 18 and 19. We had valuable conversations that prompted further discussions to occur, and there was more of a deconstruction of the TEKS to look for the accountability of the learning targets, whether that's learning progressions or our essential standards. When we asked them to describe how working as a PLC has increased your team's effectiveness, so we went from your own personal down to the whole team, those teachers in the focus group really said it was establishing the trust with one another, that you had to be vulnerable, that was a key to making that collaborative culture happen. Then was a focus again on essential standards, and then they needed the time to make that planning happen. And the last one was what norms or behaviors, because we wanted to tie back to determining what norms or behaviors actually contributed to that effectiveness. They said that having the norms was their living and breathing way of making a PLC function. They did use code words, so when a PLC member might be off task, they had code words that would reinforce and bring those members back to the discussion that was taking place for that clarity of purpose. The norms did help drive the start and stop of the PLC and keep them on task for the focus on learning. They had to be accountable to one another, and they had to learn how to be respectful. The next area of our program gauge for PLCs is really the focus on learning. Focus on learning on page 20 is the fundamental purpose of the school to ensure learning for all students, that it's the part of the educators to know what all students must know and be able to do at the end of the day and at the end of the result of the instruction. On page 21, you will see the campus administrator data feedback Likert scale, where really you start off with individual teachers assigning the priorities, individual teachers determining what's mastery, individual teachers creating their assessments, and that really this is my classroom privatization of practice, shifting up to a Likert scale of 5, where it's the collaborative teams that set the priorities. It's the collaborative teams that build shared knowledge. They collaboratively build the formative assessments, and that they're open to sharing, and again, vulnerability, to sharing best practices among the whole team. You'll see the pre-assessment from administrators, average of 3.17 in the fall to a 3.49 in the spring. You'll see again a breakdown on page 21 of each one of the indicators, shifting more out of the 2s to 3s up into the 3s to 4s. When we looked at instructional coaches' data for this one, we asked them to rate their next focus area, and 2 areas emerged. One was focus on learning for intermediate. Overall, that was 32.8% of the respondents said this is the next area that we need to focus. Intermediate scored that one a little bit higher. They did feel that that focus on learning was really talking more about what went well and what to do when it doesn't, how to support those students, that they're assessing the actual teaching and students' learning. And then one of the comments was that it was very clear, targeted, purposeful agendas that help guide that focus on learning. Teacher survey data, again, when we coded the question biggest impact, because that statement's very broad, we got coding that went to one, collaborative culture, we went to one that went to focus on learning, and then we have some that answered results oriented. So when we code for just focus on learning, two things emerged. One, clear purpose in what they're meeting for that PLC, and again goes back to the clarity of purpose that the instructional coaches indicated, as well as opportunities. They need intentionality in that collaborative conversations to use student work samples, data, reflections, and that vertical alignment, as well as prioritizing the PLC messages in the meetings for focusing on that student learning. Opportunities, really, they were looking for more opportunities on how to extend learning for students when they've mastered them. And then they wanted to investigate how to promote growth that's beneficial for all students, as well as collaborate across not only the campus, but other campuses as well across the district. Our last section is results-oriented. That's the big three of the PLC. So results-oriented. This is really the data collection of the formative assessments and informing the next piece of the work and the process. So on page 23, you will see the Likert scale for campus administrators data when we asked them. Again, that one starts where the PLC work is just really kind of optional, that they focus more on remediation, an end of the unit lesson, where they just look at data as a superficial overall passing scores, all the way up to that Likert scale of 5, where it's really embedded into the day, embedded into their process. Really, it's focusing on not only prevention or remediation, but it also focuses on prevention, the intervention, and extension, as well as using that formative assessment data throughout the cycle of learning to drive the instruction continuously forward, as well as then when they dive into that data, instead of that superficial overall passing, they're really looking at individual student scores. You'll see campus principals rated overall average of 3.16 in the fall to a 3.39 in the spring. When we have an individual breakdown, you'll see we kind of shift kind of a little bit, we get out of the 1 and into the 2s and the 3s, but that indicates this is an area of opportunity and growth for us. When we talked to instructional coaches and had them rate the 3 areas, again, we had collaborative culture, focus on learning. Overall, they all said that results-oriented is really where they want to focus moving forward. You'll see that high school at 45.5% indicated the need for that results-oriented, data-driven. Their feedback said that teachers are often pulling from what they've done in the past instead of focusing on that results of what's currently going on to drive that instruction, as well as still, again, that vulnerability and trust to let everyone see your data and explore your data and know it and know that you're working then in that collaborative process. But it's, again, more training on how to have those conversations about data, district expectations, clarifications, and really how that data fits common goals and the values and the discussion to support student learning. Teacher survey data on results-oriented really focused on 3 areas. One was the need to focus on the data, how to analyze student growth, as well as what next steps for progress monitoring. They indicated that progress monitoring would help them if they receive training and more focus on how to focus on that data to do progress monitoring for the ability groups and how to extend that learning. They also indicated that making plans to meet the needs of all of their students, so working together to look at that data instead of that superficial, more of that individual dive-in process. And one comment that they indicated was realizing that we don't always know what we're looking for when we assign student work. So that's, again, focusing on the clarity of purpose in that PLC and the work that's guiding that student instruction. So with any program, evaluation, gauge, summary, we do kind of look at recommendations and observations from the data that's collected. And there were 4 areas that really stood out to us. One was the continuous instruction of development of norms, really making sure that the PLCs and the teachers in that process understand the purpose of norms and how it helps focus on that collaborative culture, that focus on learning, and the results oriented. There was a need to continue further work and focus on learning. While the data indicated that there was strong evidence of collaborative culture and the work of the Guiding Coalition, there's evidence that we need to continue our work in the PLC process, focus on learning, and results oriented in the big 3. Consistency of expectations and clarity of purpose tie back in. It's recommended that there's clear common language and communication that align to practices that we currently do in CCISD, such as personalized learning, such as RTI, response to intervention, elementary learning progressions, our positive behavioral interventions and support teams. Really, the work of that PLC process is all intertwined. So consistency of those expectations, also with a recommendation that all teachers, regardless of area, participate in some form of a PLC, whether that is their core team on the campus or it could be a district PLC team, but that way the unity and communication is clear. Teachers, time, they expressed that dire need for time to make this happen. That was clear, and that is a recommendation. When we created the recommendations, we then looked at what practices we were already moving forward into future work with curriculum and instruction and professional learning. So there was that alignment between administrators, coaches, and teachers through bringing it into possibly the new teacher orientation work, bringing it to the back to school so it sets the stone and stage for people that are hired within CCISD, as well as just that returning back to school. Professional learning, there has been the PLC 101 foundations that has occurred in June, as well as the Leaders Learn continue as we move forward. Time was addressed with the instructional planning days that were approved by the board on the new calendar, but they were asking for that direct embedded PLC time within that instructional planning calendar. And then instructional coach professional learning that will help drive the instruction then for the coaches who then drive the work of the PLC process. That is our presentation for the program, Professional Learning Communities Program Gauge for 21-22. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Henley. That was a great presentation. I will open it up to the board for questions. Mr. Cottrell, you ready?
Yeah. Could you tell?
Yeah, I could tell.
Well, I didn't want to go first, but I will. Again, Dr. Henley, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. Focusing the support on student learning and having a collaborative culture, very important. A couple of my notes, and one of them you touched at the very end. Early on, I wrote, is there a connection with the PLCs and the teacher retention? It's obviously been a topic of conversation, and at the end of the presentation was mentioned time, and so there obviously is a connection there. It's a very time-consuming, important part of our curriculum for the teachers, but other than the time to do it, have they given much feedback as far as just, it's a stressful kind of process, or it really it is taken away from, or maybe affecting their happiness in the workplace. Something as simple as that.
Not necessarily in those words, in the data that we collected or in the responses to the survey, or even the focus group. They kept referencing the time and clarity of communication, making sure that it wasn't just one more thing. They wanted to know how it embedded all.
Yeah.
But as far as teacher retention, they did not bring that up.
No. Yeah, and I'm sure if they speak, we listen, right? So one of my other notes was on of ours, it's page 16, where it was collaborative culture, instructional coaches. One of the notes, each PLC is in a different place. Some PLCs have quote unquote mastered, and I'm adding the quotes with the verbiage, the word is mastered, this practice. What determines that mastery?
that's really going to be that, are they looking at student learning? Are they focusing on the data? Are they seeing progress and improvement? That is their definition, so it was their words for master. But when we asked that question, and my data analyst over here can help me also clarify because they were in there, but it is that, are they seeing
Self-imposed.
student learning?
Self-imposed,
Yes,
basically,
self-imposed.
you know, on that accomplishment. Okay, and, yeah, I have several places, add teacher stress, add teacher stress. Page 27, I have a note. Oh, yeah, so future focus, responsible for curriculum and instruction, page 27.
Yes.
Professional learning. There's three things that you have starred next to. So in that, CCISD is offering several PL opportunities during this summer. And they're focused on three big ideas: collaborative culture, focus on learning, and results-oriented. And my note to that is keeping it student-centered, because I know that I made that note earlier on, and when you were talking about some of the other data, was, you know, doing this to help support student learning and keeping it student-centered. And you know, and I know that there are several mentions in here about sometimes you don't even know what, you know, maybe sometimes the end goal is or what you need until you start really getting into it and everything, but, you know, keeping it student-centered, just to throw that out there as well. And what are we doing to communicate to the parents in the district that teachers are getting this extra education, this extra tool to help their children?
That's a great question.
That's a very good question.
I don't know that we've done
Yeah,
it.
yeah, Ms. Polson.
Yes,
Be-
right. We've actually created a communications plan to support the superintendent target. So we've created videos, a website, and then Dr. Silva and I have been working together about on the academic calendar page, when you see all those days, to really explain what instructional planning days look like, and what that work looks like for teachers.
Is that something that each campus is making a priority to communicate to those parents?
They
So
will.
that, I mean, it's great that these are created, but then if nobody knows, it doesn't do any good.
Yes.
So, you know, if,
Like an open house setting. or
yeah,
something
in
like
the
that.
open house or to the PTAs, I mean, that's a great resource right there to start with as well. To just say, hey, did y'all know we're tooling the teachers and this is what's in their tackle box, you know?
And having the intentional language of instructional planning versus professional learning is helpful for this.
And just keeping the parents informed. I think that helps them know that, look, these teachers just aren't graduating college, coming into a classroom and doing this stuff willy-nilly. So, yeah. So, okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Mr. Bowen?
I'll to kind of make a suggestion along those lines. I don't know if we'll still have. I know we've kind of already graduated our Inside CCISD class, but the CCISD PLC 101 could maybe be a good opportunity to bring some people from the community or parents in for a couple of hours, not the entire day. I mean, you don't want people getting underfoot, but maybe that could be a little bit of an opportunity to showcase some of this to some people. not a free for all, but maybe people who can communicate what's going on.
That's a great idea.
That's
We
an
are-
excellent
We
idea.
are offering that again in the fall, so we can maybe try to remind.
That's all I have.
That's a great idea. Anybody else? Mr. Sanchez? Thank you. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I do have, you know, PLCs, I think the strength of the PLCs is in collaborative nature and people sharing information about best practices. And as I went through this, I noticed that a very important part of what helped PLCs be successful was adopting norms that were beneficial to the group. And I guess I was a little surprised to see that there was a range of different norms adopted by the different groups. I suppose that makes sense at some level. And I was wondering, is there any sort of way that we coordinate or capture best practices with regard to norms or any other part of the PLCs to share between PLCs?
We've definitely had some learning, and our leaders learn about the creation of norms. Now, sharing amongst is a great idea, and I don't know that we've done that. Have we done that? Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
So in the leaders learn, when we talk about creating norms, there's resources in regards to thinking about interpersonal norms, but norms for the meetings, but also having examples of what has been created on a campus. So not only what does research say, but also what in CCISD have we created that is beneficial. And so having that resource for each of the big ideas that's created and a resource that they can go to for each of those things. So that piece has been, because it's great if I know what research says, but I also want to know what has been working for team in CCISD, and so that is a bank of resources that we have available on each big idea.
I commend that. I think it's really important to capture what works here. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Larson. I just had a couple of questions if everybody else is gone. The PLC team leads, do they get a stipend?
No,
Okay.
A team
There's-
leader,
yeah.
a team leader,
Go ahead.
in the elementary setting, a team leader, a grade level team leader receives a stipend that may not be the person who's leading the
Who's leading
PLCs.
the PLC, okay.
Just to separate.
Okay. And I should know this, but how many instructional coaches do we have?
About 120.
With all, including
Yeah.
LTCs and all our core, it's close to 145.
Okay.
And the LTCs is reference to learning technology.
Okay. And then, referencing page 19, I'm just curious, what were the two code words were used to get PLC test?
Ms.
I
Gaffey?
hate you.
One was David Bowie,
David Bowie?
and then the other was black coffee pre-cup.
Gotcha.
So it's just something that doesn't put somebody on the spot and makes someone uncomfortable, but keeping that accountability so it's not awkward.
Right, gotcha. I was just curious. And on page 24, I know, the elementary and the high school, said that results-oriented was important. How come the intermediate? What did they feel?
They picked focus on learning as their next step, and that was really focusing more on those essential standards at that intermediate. The coaches indicated that's where they felt the work was needed for the intermediate level.
Without any further questions, I want to thank you for that presentation. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
And the board will move back into closed session to discuss item 4. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. And we'll move into closed session at 5:30.
I know what you're gonna do.
I call us back into open session at 7:50. And with no further business before the board, I will adjourn us at 7:50.